Welcome to Podkey Fantasy Football, where camp hype meets draft math and usually loses. A bad pick usually doesn't kill a draft by itself. What does it is the chain reaction after it, when you pass on scarcer positions, chase bad camp narratives, and spend the next 6 rounds repairing the damage. The useful definition here is not just a guy who busts, it's a player, especially in rounds 2 through 6, whose price blocks better roster construction. That matters because fantasy managers often grade the pick in isolation. If the player scores fine, they call it a win, but the real cost is what you didn't take instead. Passing on elite tight end or strong running back pockets for a receiver who merely hits projection can still be a losing move if the later positions dry up. Nico Collins at an ECR around 15 is the cleanest example of the opportunity cost argument. The concern isn't that he can't produce, it's that 12.7 fantasy points per game may have been helped by volume that isn't guaranteed to stay as friendly, and that draft slot asks you to bypass premium running back or tight end equity. DJ Moore's case is more about narrative inflation. If the bullish argument depends on a Josh Allen target spike, you have to deal with Buffalo's lower pass volume environment under Joe Brady. More targets for one player inside a smaller pie can still disappoint. Breece Hall is interesting because the name and talent can hide a structural question. If offensive changes cap his receiving work, then one of the easiest ways back separate in PPR gets weaker. And Bucky Irving is exactly the kind of player who can look fine in August and still hurt you at cost. If the role becomes a committee and there's already injury history noise, then you're paying lead back pricing for maybe lead back usage. Training camp isn't useless, but the signal is uneven. Source quality matters, the wording matters, and repetition matters. Trusted beat writers describing concrete reps, alignments, red zone work, or who ran with the starters is a lot different from vague buzz or anonymous hype. Millie Neighbour's back issue is a real example because health can move a player from fringe first-round pricing into the 3rd through 5th if the uncertainty lingers. That's not overreaction. That's the market repricing missed time, pain tolerance, and re-injury risk. Alec Pierce missing camp after March ankle surgery is similar. Until the timeline is clear, the risk isn't just whether he misses week 1. It's lost install, lost chemistry, and maybe starting the season behind. Joint practices also deserve more weight than preseason box scores. They're usually better reps against unfamiliar defenses with more meaningful work for actual contributors and less noise from fringe players. Quarterback battles create a pretty simple math problem. Practice reps are finite, so the eventual starter often gets fewer early reps than a settled starter would. That doesn't guarantee a bad September, but it's a reasonable drag on timing and readiness, especially if there's also a scheme shift involved. Sometimes coaches keep a competition alive because they want the backup engaged, not because it's truly 50-50. That's understandable, but it can still cost the offense useful prep time. The schematic fit piece matters too. A shotgun-heavy quarterback in an under-center structure, or the reverse, can force compromise. If Minnesota had to adapt for a Kyler Murray-type fit, that's not just a style note. It can change early season efficiency for the whole offense. Fantasy players love talent discussions, but offensive line quality can overwhelm them. When a line is a true outlier, good or bad, it can change projections more than the back's profile does. That's why sudden running back breakouts and collapses often look less mysterious once you check line performance and continuity. The Raiders example, where production jumped once the line gelled, fits that pattern. Committee risk layers on top of that. Bucky Irving has Kenneth Gainwell and Sean Tucker around him. Jacksonville can drift into a 3-way replacement mix. Washington and Carolina have their own moving parts. Until camp shows clear early down and red zone separation, these are volatile bets, not stable workloads. And then there's durability. Since 2010, 17 running backs cleared 400 touches and 10 followed with either injury or at least a 20% PPR decline. That doesn't prove workload causes collapse every time, but it does say automatic repeatability is a weak assumption. The broader trend points the same way. Roughly 70% of top 5 PPR backs since 2005 failed to repeat the next year. For elite volume players, the right response isn't panic, it's pricing in risk and building insulation, including handcuffs when the backup path is credible. Target share is still one of the best stabilizers in fantasy, but raw share without team context can mislead. Jameson Williams, jumping from 4.8 to 7.4 targets per game, and from 10.9 to 15.2 fantasy points when Laporta was out, shows how redistribution can matter immediately. That's useful because it connects role change to actual production. Quarterback dependency matters too. Devon Achane's split with and without Tua was massive. Michael Wilson's scoring moved dramatically depending on Marvin Harrison Jr.'s availability. Those aren't just player evaluations, they're environment evaluations. The same logic supports some bullish cases. If a coordinator or quarterback reliably funnels targets, that raises the floor for players like A.J. Brown or Kyle Pitts. But for Pitts especially, a 30% target share only becomes elite tight end scoring if the team throws enough. That's the key background on tight ends. The 16-plus PPR seasons at the position have historically come from pass-heavy teams with strong touchdown output. So when people project a tight end ceiling, ask whether the offense can actually support it. One of the more interesting process claims here is that market score outperforms raw ADP. The reason that can make sense is that ADP tells you where drafters are going, while a blended model can add history and comparables instead of just reflecting current sentiment. Weighted comps aren't magic, but they do force a more disciplined question. What have similar players actually done, and how often? That can also expose where ADP is being pushed by things unrelated to standalone player value, like stacking behavior. If Burrow rises because stacks are popular, cheaper pieces elsewhere can become the actual value. In best ball, the same principle applies. Small sample draft rooms overreact. Quarterback prices can swing enough to make certain builds more attractive, and differentiated exposures can matter, but the exposure rules only help if the player prices are actually wrong. League format changes the board more than people admit. In two wide receiver leagues, running backs naturally move up because the starting requirement is lower at wideout and the flex can still absorb RB upside. That means some trap calls get stronger in that format. If you're spending early picks on receivers without clear volume insulation, the opportunity cost gets harsher. On the watch list, the names worth monitoring are the ones where price has already moved on fragile evidence. Zay Flowers climbing from the 6th to the 3rd, Luther Burden into the early 5th, Trevor Lawrence off a late-season surge, and late quarterbacks like Tyler Shuck or Jackson Dart all fit that bucket. None of those are automatic fades. The point is that when ADP moves faster than certainty, your job is to ask what new information truly changed and what part is just a market story. The sharpest edge right now is usually not predicting the next breakout. It's pricing uncertainty better than your room does. Thanks for listening to Podkey Fantasy Football. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.